The country that tried to delete its own history. Narration script. The year is 1975. A government announces that history, as far as the country is concerned, no longer exists. Not symbolically, officially. The calendar resets. The year becomes zero. Everything that came before this day, every record, every institution, every memory, is treated as if it never happened. This isn't a metaphor historians use to describe a dramatic political shift. This is a literal policy. A regime tried to delete the past of an entire nation, and for almost 4 years, it came terrifyingly close to succeeding. By the end of this video, you'll understand how a country can try to erase its own history, why it's nearly impossible to actually pull off, and the strange twist buried in this story, because the very people who tried hardest to make history disappear ended up creating one of the most detailed records of human suffering ever assembled. The attempt to erase the past accidentally preserved it. This is the story of Cambodia's Year Zero. To understand how something this extreme could happen, you have to go back further, to a country already on the edge of collapse. Cambodia, in the early 1970s, was caught in the gravitational pull of a war it didn't start. Next door, the Vietnam War was tearing through Southeast Asia, and American bombing campaigns spilled across the Cambodian border, killing tens of thousands of civilians and destabilizing the countryside. Farmers lost their land. Cities filled with refugees. The government in power was corrupt and increasingly disconnected from the suffering happening just outside the capital. Into that vacuum stepped a movement called the Khmer Rouge, Cambodian communists led by a man who would later go by the name Pol Pot. They promised something simple and seductive, a return to purity. No corruption, no foreign influence, no inequality. Just a society rebuilt from the ground up, free of everything they believed had poisoned it. In April of 1975, the Khmer Rouge marched into the capital, Phnom Penh, and took control of the country. Crowds initially cheered, exhausted by years of war and desperate for it to end. Within hours, that relief turned into something almost unimaginable. The new government didn't just want political power. They wanted to erase the entire foundation of modern Cambodian life and start over, as if civilization itself could be reset like a machine. The first move was emptying the cities. Within days, the Khmer Rouge forced nearly 2 million people out of Phnom Penh and into the countryside. Hospitals were cleared mid-surgery. Patients were marched out on IV drips. The reasoning was ideological. Cities represented capitalism, corruption, and Western influence. The countryside represented the pure agrarian life the regime wanted to engineer. Money was abolished entirely. Banks were blown up. Currency became worthless paper overnight, sometimes used as kindling. If you can't buy anything, you can't accumulate wealth. And if you can't accumulate wealth, the regime believed, society couldn't be corrupted again. But removing money was only the beginning. The next target was identity itself. Family structures were dismantled. Children were separated from parents and placed into youth labor groups, raised to see the regime, not their families, as their true source of loyalty. Religion was banned. Buddhist monks, who made up a significant portion of Cambodian spiritual life, were forced to abandon their robes or were executed. Temples were converted into prisons, warehouses, or simply left to decay. Education was treated as a threat rather than a tool. schools closed, books were destroyed, and anyone associated with education, teachers, doctors, engineers, became a target because knowledge was seen as inherently tied to the old world the regime wanted gone. Wearing glasses, speaking a foreign language, or simply having soft hands instead of calloused ones from manual labor could be enough to mark someone as an enemy of the new order. This is where the policy stopped being abstract ideology and became something far darker. The Khmer Rouge didn't just want to discourage the past. They wanted to physically remove anyone who remembered it, understood it, or could rebuild it. Estimates vary, but historians believe that between 1.5 and 2 million people died during the roughly 4 years the Khmer Rouge held power, through execution, starvation, exhaustion, and disease in forced labor camps. That's somewhere between a fifth and a quarter of Cambodia's entire population at the time. And this is where the regime's obsession with control over information becomes almost impossible to comprehend. If you wanted to erase a country's history, what would you actually have to destroy? Photographs, documents, personal letters, religious texts, newspapers, family records, anything that proved life existed before Year Zero. The Khmer Rouge attempted exactly that.